If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ramsey Nijem, former NBA strength and conditioning coach with the Sacramento Kings, now Director of Sports Performance with the University of Kansas men's basketball team. In this episode, we dive deep into the fundamental principles of strength training, practical approaches to progressive overload, and the powerful benefit of creatine supplementation. If you've ever wondered how to build lasting strength and vitality at any age, this conversation's for you. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. Today, it's a real honor. I've got a great friend of mine. We were just talking. We go all the way back to 2008. We were both pretty young in our careers, just starting out. And since my buddy Ramsey here, Ramsey Nijem, he's been through college, NBA, youngest head strength coach in NBA history, I believe. Was that right, Rams?
I think so.
And
Yeah.
then and then recently national champ with Kansas. So welcome, Ramsey. Thanks for coming on, and it's such an honor and a pleasure to chat with you today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to start my career back in 2008. So this is definitely full circle, and I'm excited about it.
That was such a fun time, right? Like I remember those days when we were all young and sort of figuring it out. I recently got the head strength coach job at UCSB, and we had Maddie and Ross assisting in the weight room, and you showed up as well, and that thirst for knowledge, and the environment we were in and created was one where we could be curious. I think those athletes were so open to anything, and just wanting to get better, that it allowed us to really play around with different programs and different ways of structuring things. And I love that you brought that to us. You know, you really were like, hey, I read this. What do you think? I'm like, well, let's give it a go.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember that actually vividly. But it's funny. I think back on my career now, and I'm so glad that you created that environment, because I thought that was normal. But as you obviously know, like, that's not necessarily normal. A lot of people start their careers in environments where curiosity is kind of shut down, or
Yeah.
you're supposed to just be an intern and clean the weights and shut up. Like, but you fostered that, and I think that's helped me a ton in my career. So I'm definitely grateful for that. And yeah, I remember vividly. I came to you, and it's funny because now when I reflect back on it, I'm like, why would I even do that? That was crazy to even think you could do that. But you didn't see it like that, or you didn't say it like that. You were like, yeah, I think you told me that, yeah, go write it up then. And like, I had to go and like actually formalize this idea. And then we were able to do that. And so like stuff like that, it was so cool. And hopefully today with my guys that I'm helping, that help me out, hopefully they feel the same. And they're not too shy about asking questions and that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, mate. That's certainly what I was going for with that whole staff, is like it's about the athlete at the end of the day, right? We're trying to build the best program, and just because I'm the head guy doesn't mean I'm right.
No
Probably
doubt.
got a little bit more experience, but let's try new stuff, and what's the worst that can happen, right? No one's going to get hurt. We're not going to do anything stupid.
Right.
But, let's push the boundaries.
Yeah,
So that's a lot of
there's some
fun.
guardrails here. We got the bumpers up a little bit, but
Yeah.
we could color in the lines a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing for young strength coaches and trainers. We're working in the general population now, and a lot of people are practitioners out in the wild doing this. It is fostering that security in yourself and in your curiosity. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be wrong. And when you're designing programs, people are always worried about like taking the athlete or the person in the wrong direction. And it's like, well, people don't change that quick, right? If your
Right.
program's wrong, it's not like you wake up like the next day and they've gained 50 pounds,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
You can guide your program. And so that's something I always encourage young people is just don't be so sure that you're right,
Mm, no
right?
doubt.
Just understand that this is a process. There's a million ways to do it. And I've certainly in my career been through different environments and seen it done different ways and walked into that environment, been like, ooh, I don't like that.
Hmm.
And then you look around and everyone's in great shape and no one's hurt. And you're like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah. Something
I
might be
guess it,
working.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's almost like so liberating when you accept that you don't know that much, right? Or as much as
Yeah.
maybe you once thought, right? Like when I
Yeah.
reflect back to early in my career, I was probably overly confident, and now you reflect back, it's like we probably didn't know. We still don't know that much, but it's almost liberating because it's okay. It's like because we don't, it's permission to go and learn, and so that
Right.
curiosity almost like gets a little bit of a boost because it's like, man, this is cool. We can continue to search for these answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it gives you more chance of being right because ultimately you'll change your mind,
Hmm.
right? You will allow your program to meander towards the right answer. If you're just defending your position, you
Yeah,
might stay wrong for a long time.
no doubt. Yeah, you'll never change. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, tell us a bit about that journey, man. Like, so from UCSB, and that was a pretty small program we were a part of, right? It's a mid-major program, and then me, you, and Matt all went off to the NBA,
Yeah.
right? That's pretty unprecedented. So what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, well, after you took off, and I remember when you took off, uh, I think remind me, was it in January? It was like was
It,
it a lockout year transition?
it was the lockout, yeah. So Billy King called me on a Monday. I was there in Brooklyn on Thursday,
Yeah. I
right?
remember it happened so quick.
Yeah. So don't make that move. Don't move from Santa Barbara, California to Newark, New Jersey in January. Like that's just a bad move.
That had to be tough. But yeah, I mean that I remember there was a little bit of time there where there was like, some confusion on who was gonna replace you and what's
Mhm.
gonna happen. And I just remember thinking like, oh man, you gave me an opportunity to intern and then you brought me back and I was like just this sponge and I was just every day I was just excited to come into work and to your point, it's a mid major, but I didn't know what high major mid I didn't know any of that. To me,
Yeah.
it's like these are the best basketball players in the world. But I remember thinking, man, what's going to happen? And obviously, the gentleman that replaced you was Chip Schaefer, who had a ton of
Yeah.
NBA experience. Um, and so that, between you and him, that's kind of what eventually led me to the Sacramento Kings. I went on to get the master's degree in between there at Cal
Mhm.
State Fullerton. And then I actually returned to Santa Barbara to be the strength coach at Santa Barbara City College for a year.
That's
And
right.
that was like the most incredible experience. I mean, that stadium, we had an
Yeah.
outdoor weight room.
Yeah.
Uh, I remember we used to do what I called, I think I called it Tupac Fridays. And I would literally carry a boombox on my shoulder and walk across the street to the beach. And the whole football team was right behind me. And we're just on the beach doing change of direction work, just trying to like have fun.
Yeah.
Not realizing how ridiculous of a situation and setup that was. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
But
so that
that's like that stadium. I want people to envisage this. Like this is a football stadium, a city college football stadium on the beach, like literally like steps from the sand in Santa Barbara, California. That real estate's got to be like $1 billion.
for
It's
sure.
wild.
For sure. No, that it
And
might be the most beautiful
beautiful state.
football stadium in the country.
It might be. It might
Uh,
be.
yeah, La Playa Stadium, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah, that's right.
ridiculous. So,
And then what happens? So you're there in at the city college.
yep. So
What's the
that's
next step?
2014, and I was ready to be locked in because I was basically like a teacher for the city college level. You had to be a teacher to be the coach. So I was kind of like teaching classes, but the classes were strength and conditioning sessions. But it was great,
Yeah.
and then, basically a year later, I had started the doctorate at the time. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to be here for 4 years. I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to get this
Yeah.
experience. And I'm in a great situation. And I was just so excited. And then basically a year later is when the Sacramento Kings called. Chip had taken on the role there as their director of performance. And in
Right.
December, he called and he kind of just said, hey, why don't you come up to a game during Christmas break? And so I go to a game. I remember it was LeBron the first time he was on the Cavs, because this was 2013 at this point. And
Yeah.
and after the game, he just says, "Hey, there's talks of me adding an assistant for next season. We'd be making that hire this summer. Would you be interested?" And I'm like, "Of course, I'd be interested."
Yeah.
But we never really followed up on it. And then sure enough, 6 months later, he calls, and next thing I know, I'm flying to summer league and interviewing, and ended up landing that role, and
Yeah.
started there with those guys. So yeah, that was kind of the path to get there. But it was really me and you, and then Chip comes in, and I just kind of kept it going. And before you know it, you're training DeMarcus Cousins and NBA players.
Yeah. I remember we had a really cool moment. Um, I'd been at the Nets a couple of years, then you came in, and then me and you were in a weight room in Shanghai, I think. Right? We were part of the global games, and we were both training our athletes. I was with Kevin Garnett. You came in with one of your guys, and we're both in the hotel weight room. That was a really cool moment to have both taken that step. Get to introduce you to our guys at KG and those guys. That was a really fun moment.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. That and I have a picture of me, you, and Chip on the court in China,
Yeah,
and it was like, this is crazy. Like, this is from Santa Barbara, and
yeah,
here we are in China working for NBA teams. So yeah, there's a couple pictures that I would say have defined not only my career, but I guess my life over the past 15 years.
uh-huh.
And that moment in that picture definitely is one of them.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. And so from there, like you saw a big evolution in how we approach performance in the NBA. Over your time, and likewise with my time, you start seeing performance directors coming in, performance departments growing up, and then you get an opportunity in college. So how did that come about?
Yeah, yeah. I was with the Kings for 5 years. The first two, I was the assistant, and then Chip took off back home to the Bulls, um, and that's when they promoted me. So kind of 3 years there, and I think just through learning under you and learning under Chip, and seeing the evolution of the league, I was really excited for kind of that head role to, my title was head strength coach, but in my mind it was
Yeah,
like I am the director of performance. Like if it's
yeah,
performance related, I need to direct that operation.
yeah,
Um, and so I just pushed really hard. We got a brand new weight room. We moved into a brand new arena. We brought force plates in and tech and VBT
yeah,
stuff, and we brought a sports psych consultant. We brought a dietitian consultant in. I remember I was going down to UC Davis to meet with Keith Barr about tendon stuff
yeah,
before it really blew up, right? And
yeah.
uh,
Nice.
I think all of those efforts were kind of taken notice by one of our scouts at the time. His name is Bill Pope, and he's a good friend of mine now. But he was a scout for us at the Kings. And long story short, he has a really close relationship with the University of Kansas. And our
Mm,
head coach here, Coach Self, who's a Hall of Famer and a legend. Him and Bill go back to 1988 here at KU, and so
wow.
yeah, crazy. And I didn't, me and Pope I wouldn't say we were that close. You know the relationships with scouts. Scouts are on the
Sure.
road often. They come in for the draft. You don't
Yeah,
see them
great
every time.
guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You dap them up when you see them, and that's typically it.
yeah.
And I got a text message though, 2019, after my 5th year. I had just signed an extension with the Kings, and again, still like my mind says, I'm from California. I'm locked in here. This is
Mhm.
it. My mom was coming to every game. Like it was great.
Wow.
And I get a text message from Pope, and it just says, "Hey, KU needs a new head strength coach." I just put your name in, and I literally remember sitting at dinner, and I replied, just said, "Thanks, Pope." But I went to bed thinking I'm never leaving. Why would you do that?
To go to
I'm not,
Kansas.
yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm in the NBA. I'm not going to backpedal in my career.
Yeah.
Um, but long story short, you just begin to, I think, reflect and ask people for advice, people you trust. And similar to you, when you get into the NBA at a young age, I think early on, everything is glitter and gold, and the Ritz
Mhm.
Carltons are cool.
Yeah.
Um, but eventually that wears off, and it comes down to like, what am I doing every day? How am I bringing
Mhm.
value?
Mhm.
And what I realized was what I enjoyed most about the role, beyond watching the ball go up at 7 p.m. and getting to watch, LeBron and all the best players in the world. I think
Right.
what I really enjoyed and took pride in was developing our younger guys, because
Mhm.
those are guys you could really make an imprint on. I had a
Mhm.
Vince Carter in year 19.
Right. Yeah, same with KG for me. Like
Yeah, like, are we making them
they
better at
need
that?
it. Yeah.
Probably not. Um, So yeah, I think it was just a ton of like just reflecting on what is the next chapter gonna look like, and is it gonna look
Yeah.
the same as this current one, or is there an opportunity to do something different? And uh, long story short, I made that jump. Yeah. And coach said a lot of things during the interview process that I think really helped kind of my perspective. You know, one of them was, hey, you're young. If you want to go back, you can probably go back. Right. Because I think when we make these big life decisions, we just assume there's no turning back. And
Right.
it sounds like, dude, you're pretty young. If you hate it, go back. I'm not even asking you to come here. I remember him saying, I'm not asking you to marry us. Just come date us for a year or two. If you like it, stay.
Yeah.
If you don't, go back. Um, and so you just start to piece all that together, and then eventually it's like, why wouldn't I do this? Um, and I
Yeah.
think the biggest holdup on that decision was probably the ego. It was like,
Hmm.
I'm an NBA strength coach. That sounds cool to say out loud.
Yeah.
Um, and then eventually you realize, like, other than telling it to a few friends who probably don't care anyways, like nobody actually cares. So yeah, I made the jump and have really enjoyed it and been here ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important to acknowledge there, Rams. I think that was my journey. Similarly, NBA marginally impactful. I think you do a really good job with the guys that you got in front of you and the time you're given and all the rest of it. Um, the college level for me was really, I think, still my favorite job at UCSB.
Hmm.
I think we were the most impactful, the most creative. We saw the most variety, right? You got 500 kids, you got 60 kids in the weight room at once, and it was just going.
Yeah.
So I really reflect on that as one of my favorite times. The NHL was a little different as well. Like we had whole off season program where we had guys in Toronto. 60% of the NHL's from Toronto.
Oh wow,
Like,
I
can you
did not
believe
know
that?
that.
Yeah. So you guys are not leaving. There, that's home.
Yeah.
Right. So we had an amazing program where we would bring in all of our prospects because you have like a ton of prospects that come in. So we were really developing guys. We had 9 guys go on to get NHL contracts from
Wow.
the draft. So that was huge. Um, but then that identity piece, man, that stings when you think about leaving sport. I think that's the biggest challenge,
Hmm.
especially when you're out because suddenly your phone stops ringing.
Yep.
Right, like
Yep.
you realize all these companies, all these people, they were hitting you up regularly because of your title, not because of
Yeah.
who you were.
Yeah. Because the logo on your polo.
Yeah, exactly right,
No
exactly.
doubt. No doubt.
So that's an amazing journey, mate, and in some pretty unique environments, and has obviously shaped under different mentorship, has shaped your philosophy, and then you've gone out, you've become the head guy, and you've taken on that onto a whole new level for yourself, right? You've crafted your philosophy now. Today, I really want to talk about, and you've become an educator in this field as well. Let's not forget that you've created a wonderful certification that I've had a number of my staff members go through. I want to talk about lifting, right? I've taken the leap out of sport altogether and am now working with the general population. When I was in sport, the number one metric for injury, we're not going to say prediction, but for me to say, yeah, this guy's probably going to get hurt. If you're weak, you are getting hurt.
Mm.
And so fast forward now to the general population. For me, longevity and vitality, as we focus on, is avoiding frailty at all costs,
Mm.
right? For me, that means being really strong.
Yeah.
So as we introduce these concepts, and you and I were talking before about now it's sort of unusual if you're not thinking about that at 40.
Yeah.
People are coming on this for the first time when they're 40. I started an 85-year-old woman in the weight room, right? First time she'd ever lifted anything. And it was literally her body weight, right? So what does training look like? What does weight training look like as an overarching philosophy? We've got different sets and reps. We've got different styles of weight training. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into kind of the weeds of it a little bit. But to start, I think fundamentally it's just trying to do something that's a little bit more challenging than your everyday life. And then eventually, like with my young guys, it's basically that. But then after about a month, it's like, let's do something a little bit more challenging than what you've been doing for the past month. And as long as we continue with that mindset of let's just do something a little bit more challenging, you'll continue to kind of adapt, and then we'll put a new stimulus and
Yeah,
you'll adapt. And so I think strength is fundamentally just that. It's like figuring out what is not very challenging for you and then do a little bit more than that. And over time, you'll just continue to adapt. And I think it's funny here with our guys, we get some of the best high school athletes in the country, right? They come here,
Hmm.
but literally I've seen them gain 5 pounds of muscle and strength improve by doing tempo push-ups, and it's just
Yeah,
like there's nothing special about that, but it's just a little bit more challenging than you're used to. And as long as we fuel it and sleep and all the things that we'll probably unpack, like as long as all of that is there, strength training to me is just a stimulus to ultimately what we want. In this case, more strength, right? And maybe there's other things there, but that's kind of how I look at it. It's just like we're probably not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to do something a little bit more challenging than you're used to, and over time we'll progress it, and eventually things just seem to line up pretty well.
yeah. I love that definition so much because we can, and what we're hearing, in the podcasts that are coming up, everything sounds so complicated,
Mm,
right? And you can get into wars online, right? Like no, nothing will get you taken down quicker than you express an opinion on something, right? And so that for me really is in a nutshell because the message that we're hearing, and there's a lot going towards women right now, is like you got to lift heavy. Like, well, what does that mean?
hmm
What do you mean heavy?
Yeah,
And I think to your point, it's heavier than you can currently lift,
right,
right?
no doubt. And I mean, isn't that like, yeah, it's true you got to lift heavy, but heavy is relative. So what's heavy for maybe, the 83-year-old woman you're working with is carrying her groceries in, and what's heavy for one of my seniors might be 315 pounds on a half field squat. Like,
Yeah,
they're both heavy. And matter of fact, RPE might be pretty similar for both of them. It's just
right,
they look
right.
different. So yeah, it's such a relative thing, but no one talks about that on the internet because heavy to everybody on the internet is weights that look like, only Ronnie Coleman can push.
Yeah, exactly. And explain that metric you just said RPE. Explain that for us.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's just like how challenging is something for you on a scale of 1 to 10. And so for some people, carrying your groceries to the car it might be an 8 out of 10, and for my guys that's a 0 out of 10, right? But eventually every guy is going to have a different scale of that, and so we use that a ton though. Typically I don't even,
Yeah.
I usually will pick the weights for my guys based on like velocities and stuff, but I'll just ask like, yo, how'd that feel? Scale 1 to 10. About a 6. Cool, let's take it to an 8. Throw 10 on each side. And it
Hmm.
literally looks like that and feels like that. So yeah, that's just I guess just a scale of how challenging something is.
Yeah. That's something that we've used a ton as well. Like we tried all these metrics for like a guy's tired, are they did they work hard enough, all these different things. And one of the things that I would always ask, well, have you asked them?
Mhm.
They'll probably tell you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Just
It's like it's almost the anti-technology model, right? It's like those things are all great, but
yep.
sometimes the conversation is pretty good.
But you don't always have them either, right? The technology isn't always there. Like this thing on my wrist, like sometimes I forget my heart rate strap, right? So I don't have it. And even in pro sport, my welcome to pro sport, we were actually in Sacramento at the old arena. And I was there with KG and he worked out before every game we did a workout. The only space we could work out was in front of the urinals in the men's bathroom. Right, we had a 30 and a 35-pound dumbbell, and I've got KG. He's played like 20 years in the league,
Yeah.
and he's doing lunges in front of the urinals in his flip flops, like odd dumbbells. I'm like, this is not what I thought this would look like.
Yeah, no doubt. Isn't that so
Yeah,
funny? So, and people looking from the outside looking in, people think everything is gonna be amazing. It's like, no, half the workouts are on the road in the hallway with one dumbbell and one med ball and a minivan. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and that's it. But you got to get it done. But yeah, sometimes it doesn't look like I think some people what I thought and probably what you thought going into it.
Same thing. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I thought. So, so you start, guys. You mentioned push-ups. Certainly with some of my like older clients, we'll start with basically, can you get out of the chair?
Mm,
But really, with that same vision in mind, we start the conversation with what would you like to be doing when you're 90,
mm,
right? And so, okay, if you want to play pickleball, we know the demands of pickleball.
right,
So what we got to do is close the gap, right? If you're not there today at 60, what makes you think you're going to be there when you're 90,
right, for sure.
right? So we've got to close that gap now and keep you there going forward. Imagine it's a similar starting place for you. It's that assessment of what are the demands of basketball? Where are you today?
Yeah, for sure. And I think fundamentally too, it's almost like what are the demands that coach is going to place on you guys, whether that's
Mm.
practice or games, or we have something called boot camp, which I know from a conditioning perspective is kind of our peak. And yeah, we just work backwards from there. It's like if we know you need to be, here, and currently you're not, what do we need to do to build you there as slowly but realistically as possible, right? Like, uh, we're in our first month now, and they're starting to feel it because you're basically coming off of an April and a May where you probably didn't do much. You come into June, and although we didn't ramp it up to 100% on week one, we started at 50 and we moved it to 60 and 70. But now you're in week 4 and we're sitting around 80%, and the
Yeah.
accumulation of load is kind of taking its toll on you. But yeah, we just basically work back. And the nice part about basketball, maybe relative to some other sports, if I think through like a football team, for the most part, most of the guys do very similar things in basketball because the
Mhm.
court and the dimensions and the tactics basically drive what the body has to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a center and you don't run back, like you're just going to get subbed out the game.
Right.
Versus in football, there's these huge discrepancies between positions and demands: a quarterback versus a
Right.
lineman versus a wide receiver, linebacker, right? Like and so that's actually to me probably, I don't know if it's harder because you can still bug at people, but it's maybe it takes more thinking. Whereas for me,
Mhm.
like all my guys do the same conditioning because I know that
Yeah.
you all need to be able to run up and down this court.
Yeah.
But even still, it's still simple. My conditioning looks like basketball players running on a basketball court. I don't do
Right.
too much other stuff. So yeah, I try to keep it simple and just build back
Yeah.
from the gap. I tell our freshmen when they come in, a lot of them want to go to the NBA, and it's, well, there's a gap between where you are in the NBA, and it's our job to figure out what that gap is through some testing and assessments, and then just chip away at that gap as much as we can. And we're probably not going to close it in year one, but hey, maybe I can get you 20% there. And then if you go to the
Mhm.
NBA, that strength coach can take you the rest of the way. So,
Mhm.
yeah, close that gap no matter what.
Yeah, I think I'd love to really emphasize a point you made there, and that is that your conditioning looks like basketball players running on a basketball court, right? We need to translate that into the real world as well, right? And we need to be thinking about that progression of, okay, well, here you are today, right? I had a young ballerina come talk to me. She just had a knee surgery. She had 3 weeks of rehab that was sitting on a bench having laser on her knee. And then they told her, great, you're good to go. Well, lo and behold, her knee still hurt.
Yeah,
And that was my message to her. Like, if your rehab hasn't yet looked like ballet, you're not ready for ballet,
for
right? If
sure.
you haven't jumped, you haven't stood on one leg, you haven't built that foundational stuff, of course you're still in pain.
Hmm.
But the unfortunate message was, okay, well, if it still hurts in 3 months, not 3 weeks, you'll probably have to have another surgery and you won't get to do ballet anymore.
Mm.
Right. So I think that's a really important piece here where it is as simple as does your training somewhat reflect the sport that you want to play?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously we might call that, the said principle, but I always think in
Mhm.
like terms of just traditional like school testing, right? Like when you were in high school and you had a math test, you probably studied math before you took the test. Or if you didn't, you just weren't all that surprised when you got a bad grade on it, right? Yeah, I probably deserve that. I didn't study last night.
Yeah.
And to me, training and rehab is the same thing. Like if the test is the sport, if the test is ballet, then why wouldn't you study that? And studying just happens to look like training that's pretty close to it. And so, yeah, for sure. If you want to pass a test, you need to study or do the work for that test.
Yeah. And so where do you set that bar on? So you've done your testing, you understand. And I think again, that's a point we should emphasize is that you start up with a trainer. How do they assess you?
Hmm.
Right? Do you walk in day one and they just crush you? Like first day in the gym to prove how tough a trainer they are? Or is
Right.
there some process of assessment?
Hmm.
Um, Making sure that we do understand where we are relative to our goals. How do you draw the line then on, okay, here's where we're starting, number one, and then when is that progression? When does somebody know that they're ready to take a step in intensity and move on to the next thing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the way we kind of do it, I call June our block zero. So all my guys basically start on the same page come June 1st. Whether you're an incoming freshman or you're a junior going to become a senior, you're still going to start on block zero. And the main reason is it's a way to either learn new movement patterns or revisit these movement patterns that we know are important. But I also know that currently, June 1st, you probably don't have the work capacity we need. You probably don't have some of the fundamental strength qualities we need. Your tendons probably aren't ready for what's about to come as far as basketball volume and even weight room stuff. And so for me, I kind of look at it like, if I have to sacrifice June to make sure everybody has a solid foundation, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, because other people might come in and say, well, he doesn't need that because he's a senior and he's been here. And I would argue, well, he still needs a foundation, and there's no harm in revisiting that foundation. So for us, everyone tests, but regardless of where you're at, I don't begin to individualize until July. And then the way that we make determinations on progressions are, I guess, really a few things. The first one is basically, how are you feeling? How's your body feeling? I literally just had this conversation with them last week. They're all going to go home for 4th of July weekend. And it's, hey, I know you're hurting right now. We can grind through this. If you're moody, you need to sleep more. You need to eat more. If you're sore, we got some other things we'll do. But the goal is to get you through next Wednesday. And then you're going to get about 5 days off where you should come back pretty refreshed and recharged. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, then I know that you probably aren't ready for the next progression, in which case we'll just pull back a little bit on you. And so we'll begin to kind of bucket come July for those guys. But I think fundamentally it's just based on some of our testing. We use mainly force plates for that stuff. And then how are you responding? And come July and going forward, that's where we start to really individualize based on how guys are responding. And so and part of that response is just subjective. How are you feeling? Sometimes it's more objective. We'll get our trainers and our PTs to get their hands on you. But yeah, we try to eventually individualize that based on how you're responding to our trainings. I think ultimately the goal of training isn't to train. The goal of training is that you're adapting to something. And I think we mainly want to monitor that part.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. That's, again, like that's how we're taking that principle into this real world. Right? We are objectively measuring, but sort of on a quarterly cadence. The in-between time, that's subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I'm sort of guiding people is like, if rep 12 starts to look a lot like rep 1, probably time to move. If I don't know what rep you're on, right?
Right.
Right, it's probably time to increase the weight or the speed. And I'd like to talk about that kind of progression for people. What are the different ways in which we can increase that intensity?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, there's a ton of them, right? Fundamentally, volume load is probably the maybe the more challenging one to actually think through, because it takes a little bit of math. But I literally just had a conversation with one of our coaches, and he's getting back into it right now. And he sends me a long message that's essentially, how do I know when I could progress? And he's like, last time I did this, I got to this point, I felt good, but I progressed too fast and I got hurt. And so I literally was just like, well, let's just do this. And it was count the total reps, count the total sets. That gives you a total volume. And for him, I think on there it was like 3x10 is 30 reps total for that exercise. Next week, why don't we go to 3x8? Now we've taken you down to 24 reps, but I want you to take the weight up a little bit. If that feels good, can we go back to adding reps, but now we have more weight? And it's just this slow and, like, I don't know, stepwise progression. It's like, if we drop the number of reps, let's make sure we equate effort by increasing load. And then now that we know if we've increased load, but we took reps down, let's take reps back up. Can we keep that load? And if those two seem to shine, then we can just kind of keep doing this kind of stepwise progression until eventually you've reached your goal, or it's time to move on, or maybe it feels too easy. Because then you get into, okay, how do we keep, if it's not just load and reps, well, you can change rest period. Now we're messing with density a little bit. You used to everything we just talked about. Instead of 90 seconds rest, take it down to a minute. So now everything else is going to be a little harder because you're just a little bit more fatigued or tired going into the next set. You can look at repetition. Earlier I talked about tempo push-ups. You could look at, hey, you've been doing, keep everything the same. I want your rest periods the same, your sets the same, the reps the same, even the weight the same. The one difference is you've been lowering it kind of fast. I want you to lower it for 3 seconds now. Then I want you to stop for 1 second and then push it away from you. Everything else is the same, but now I've increased the duration of that set. So that's another way. You can increase. Now, if you're going to increase the velocity, that's more of a progression, but you can increase the speed that you're moving at. So yeah, there's a million ways to kind of do this. And because of it, I look at each one of those ways as just a tool in the tool belt. And I think sometimes people want to come out and just show off all their tools. And it's like, yo, look at all the tools. And it's like, well, this project right here only requires a hammer. Just pull the hammer out.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Like slow down. That's working.
yeah.
One of our coaches last week, he's got a son that's been responding really well. He's in high school and he's been responding to training great. He comes to me and says, "Hey man, he's working with this guy out in Kansas City." And I could tell he's looking for my advice. I said, "Well, how's he been responding? Is his vert going up? His body weight going up? His strength going up?" He said, "Yeah, he's doing great." He said, "You think we should take it to 3 days?" And I said, "Well, why? You just told me he's doing great. Why would you do that? Why don't you just keep it at 2?" And he said, "You think so? I just thought maybe we can get more." I said, "You probably can. But if you're getting a lot from 2, why don't we wait until we don't get a lot from 2?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a plateau. And then just now we have the tool that we can use is one extra day." So that's another way of progressing. Just add a day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think of all these as just different tools, and it's like every person is just a project, and you're a general carpenter trying to solve that problem with all these different tools.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how we sort of think of it too, and I think that comes with experience. I think we tend to dial in and try and show everyone how smart we are when we're young, and like, look at all the stuff I know. And it becomes really simple. I had a conversation. We released the episode this week with Professor Stu Phillips on muscle and protein synthesis, and we were just talking about, and like, training can be a bit boring, right? It's not entertainment, and we are certainly out here in the real world, but it's crept into sport a little bit. Different workout every day, high volume. Basically, the goal is tired,
Yeah.
right? That it's a workout. It's not training.
Mm-hmm.
So I think picking the trait that you look to improve, we probably go. We're starting with people who haven't been through a lot of this, so we probably go a little bit of volume, a little bit of weight, a little bit more volume, then a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of speed, right? And start building the tolerance to the velocities. The way I've always looked at injury is that it's force, velocity, and direction specific,
No
right?
doubt.
And so as we're starting to look at, okay, you want to play pickleball. As we're starting to look at pickleball, we start to build that nice stable foundation with some endurance, and we're taking care of that force side of things. Then we start looking at the reason there's a proliferation of injuries, Achilles ruptures and stuff in pickleball, is because suddenly you go from the couch to putting on like a full deceleration through your calf,
Yeah,
right? That rate of force development, your tendon's just not ready for it. You haven't done any elastic training yet.
for sure.
But to get to the elastic training, we got to go through some strength training,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so really making sure that we sort of condition the tissues, we strengthen them, and then we get to speed. That for me is everything for this population. But
Yeah.
it is, like you said, it's slow and it's stepwise.
And it's you mentioned earlier, like sometimes it could be boring. And I think even as coaches, sometimes I think a lot of strength coaches, if you're in the private sector, maybe it's a little bit different, but I think a lot of strength coaches sometimes change things because they get bored.
Yeah.
And it's like I tell strength coaches that come, literally I have strength coaches, can I come and watch? Sure. And I always feel this like pressure to tell them, hey, this might not look special. Like I don't want you coming in here. We just had a kid drive 9 hours, and I literally like I felt bad. I'm like, you're gonna drive 9 hours to watch them do tempo goblet squats. Like I
Yeah.
feel terrible about that. But it's just like I'm not a cute trainer,
Yeah.
and
But it's
it's
the most
simple and it's
important
boring.
lesson that trainer will learn, right? You think oh, I feel bad. He's going to come and watch him do goblet squats. That's the lesson he needed,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
He
good
needed to
point.
walk into an elite Division 1 weight room and see the foundational principles being taught, right? He
Mm-hmm.
didn't need to, if he'd walk in and seen you do your fanciest basketball exercise, he's going home. He's doing that with every grade school kid, every high school kid, right?
Yeah, yeah,
This is what Kansas do,
yeah, no doubt.
right?
I have this.
That's important.
I have this video on my phone. I'll try to send it to you after. I had a player once ask me about basketball specific. He was like,
Yeah.
"Ram, when we gonna do the basketball specific stuff?" I said, "Oh, you want? Okay, hold on." And I grabbed a basketball and I put it on the floor next to him. And I said, "Hey, man, do the same exercise, but now there's a basketball near you, so it's basketball specific."
Yeah,
And I
right.
I have
Exactly.
one. We were in I think Memphis's weight room. It was the same thing. I think someone was doing like a T-bar row, and I just like balanced the basketball on there for him. I'm like, "Here you go,
There
basketball
you go.
specific."
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, like training, we're training the sport, and there's a level of transfer we're gonna worry about. But what we're trying to do is literally just reverse engineer to say what systems are required to play the sport, right? Like if we know in um, basketball or pickleball that there's an Achilles issue, then we probably need to appreciate how the mechanism of the injury and how do we train that thing. Like,
Yeah.
but that sounds boring. So it's like, no, do this special thing. I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
So
Well, then I can take my guy. I can do the special thing. He gets hurt, and I can blame the guy who works for the team. you know?
no doubt. Yeah, yeah, exactly. We could talk all day on that for sure. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think
Yeah.
if you're there's a lot of it going on currently, obviously, with what's happened in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But what the team guys often have to deal with, and what we've had to deal with in our careers, is the accumulation of load over 82 games. And it's like, if you're the summer guy, it's like, yeah, that for the most part, they shouldn't be getting hurt because the volume that's on their body is relatively low.
Right.
And as much as all of this stuff is important, it's like volume is probably the main driver. And so there's no special exercise I can do that can, combat 82 games of fast paced basketball with a player who went through the Olympic, like, as you think through Tyrese and some of that, it's just,
Yeah.
there's no special answer for that. And if someone thinks they have it, they probably have a DVD to sell you or a program to sell you, but they've probably never been in the actual locker rooms.
If someone's still selling you a DVD, Rams, I think we need to be careful of that guy.
No doubt.
You
But
know what?
those same people probably do have DVDs as well.
They for sure have DVDs. Maybe some cassettes out there too. But I want to. All right, I want to bite on that a little bit. On that law getting chucked in because you and I, you posted something on Instagram and I reposted it and it's talking about these injuries in sport. And I think this audience would be interested in this conversation. We put a system together in Toronto and we went 3.5 years without having a non-contact injury. Right. So yeah, you can prevent these injuries. But people confuse that with it being easy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is an infinitely complex ecosystem that we're dealing with. Right. This isn't just like for us, it was groin injuries, but like this isn't just an Achilles that the Indiana staff are dealing with. Who's responsible? Everyone wants to point at somebody. Right. And people within the organization sometimes want to, I'm responsible for rehab. I'm responsible for injury. It's not the athletic trainer. It's not the strength coach. It's everyone. Right. If we didn't have the backing of our general manager and our head coach, right, and everyone in between, we would never have done that. Right. We had to get buy-in from a head coach who had never seen any of this stuff. Right. We had to have him modify his practices to where they were short duration, high intensity. We had to have him modulate that throughout the week. We had to have him give days off, which is not a hockey thing to do, right, when we needed him, or add a day sometimes, right? Because people think, again, load management is just taking away load. It isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got to have a GM who agrees to the travel schedule, right? Are we taking red eyes everywhere? Are we doing this? Then you got to feed them. Then you got to get them hydrated.
For sure.
You got to get your staff working together and talking.
Yeah.
So like, this is not an Instagram moment of like, oh man, if he'd just done some jump rope, he would have been fine.
Yeah.
Right?
No doubt. No, it's so funny when people say those things. It's just like, are you actually that arrogant to think that the people working for these teams don't know about jump roping or whatever the example is, right? It's like we all have access to the same information.
Yeah.
Most of the people, these teams have a lot of money. They can spend it how they want. Like for the most part, we probably don't necessarily have a lack of knowledge in these situations. It goes to what you just pointed out. It's a lack of a total system with buy-in from the top down, including the player. And then I think, I always think through like the risky business of sport. My favorite quote on this, is, I don't even know who this guy is, William Shedd. So I may be butchering his own quote, but he has this quote where he says, a ship is safest in harbor, but that's not what ships are for. And I think athletes it's like, if you don't want anyone to get hurt, as bad as it sounds, like, don't play. Dude. Now, once we accept that you're going to play, let's do everything we can to avoid this. But there's a reality here that this might happen to anybody.
Yeah. that like my mantra in sport is that like in at the least we're a hockey club, we're not a sports science club.
Mm.
Easiest way to prevent every injury is we don't play another hockey game,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
But we're going to. I wouldn't let our staff pull guys from practice. I wouldn't let them go in and tell the coach he can't play. Like,
Hmm.
no, this is hockey.
Yeah,
We adjust,
yeah,
right?
no doubt,
We do something different. And every now and then, if you act like that, the coach will let you change something.
for sure. Yeah, for
But
sure. Yeah, and
that
probably eventually, after a year or two with him, they're beginning to lean on you, I'd imagine, right? At some point, he realized, wow, this guy's not coming in and telling me how to do my job. I'm way more open to actually asking him for advice.
exactly. And look, that point about it being sport, about risk. You think about Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Your assessment of risk is very different than
Hmm.
Game 3 in Cleveland,
For sure. Yeah.
right? Like it's just a different conversation.
Yep.
First of all,
Yeah,
nobody's making that player play.
for
The
sure.
NBA doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody's injecting that guy with painkillers and pushing him out there,
Yep.
right? That player is in that conversation.
Yep. And
And
in this particular case, and it happened with KD as well, like similar situation. These players were very vocal about wanting to play, and I think
yeah,
if you were a critic or wanted to push back, it'd be easy to say, well, it's your job to protect them. But it goes back to, well, this is sport. The point is to win.
yeah,
And the other part too about that is, in a couple cases, sometimes the idea of risk becomes elevated because you had a calf strain and all that. But also our tolerance for risk comes down because it's game 7. So it's like, even within just risk alone, there's moving parts. It's like your
yeah,
risk went up because you had a calf strain, but our tolerance for risk probably went down because it's game 7. If this was a dang, to your point, game 3, you're not playing. It's an easy call.
yeah,
And I always think through like the what ifs, but what if he would have had 30 and tore it in the third quarter and they win? Like maybe you ask the player, is that a trade off you might want to make? And for some players, assuming he can come back and be healthy and fine like KD has, like that might be worth it. KD, you could argue, got a couple rings out of that experience. So, yeah, it's nuanced, but no one
yeah.
appreciates that on social media.
No, no, no. And that's exactly it. Like what I see, I saw a post the other day, like this person presented like our system, our data analytics system predicted this injury. It wasn't this one that we're talking about, but
Mm.
they predicted this one person would get injured. Might have been in the English Premier League. I didn't see that person on every other game that their system had predicted an injury where it didn't happen. Right? No, they weren't posting, "Oh, we predicted 12 injuries today. None of them came through."
No
Like,
doubt. Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, now we're in the weeds of it, right? Like injury prediction is diagnostic, so then it would have sensitivity and specificity to it, like no different than any other exam or test. So if I want to make a joke about it, it's like I could predict every injury. You go to a team, you say every one of your players will get hurt this year, and when the first injury comes, you say, "See, I told you so. I predicted
right.
that." Well, what about the 97 you didn't? You said we're gonna get hurt, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. There's a lot of I guess people have called them ambulance chasers when it comes to the
Yeah.
injury stuff.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, okay. Well, sidebar over. I'm glad we got that off our chests.
Yeah, yeah, you can edit that out if you need to.
Yeah, that might be a separate clip. So, one of the things, just to bring us back, one of the things that we're talking about here, and I emphasize this a lot in nutrition and other areas, it is tactics versus strategy, right? So, our tactics are all those little things that we were talking about. Do we increase load? Do we increase volume? Do we increase speed? They are ways to achieve this underlying strategy of overload,
Hmm.
right? How do we move from, okay, we've adapted to training, it's become a little easier. How do we make it a little harder,
Mm.
right? I think so long as we move it into a little bit harder, not like I just buried myself, taking a small step in some way, increase the weight, increase the reps. And I want to talk about reps now, because there's been some philosophical shifts on rep ranges recently. Um, but that's it, right? It's simple.
Hmm.
Just make it a little harder.
Yeah.
So with the whole lift heavy thing, becomes, okay, are we used to think of like, okay, 1 to 3 was like max, and then there was like 3 to 6, and then 6 to 12, and then up from there. That's somewhat blurred now, right? Like, so how are we now thinking about repetition ranges for people starting up, and sort of where do we need to be in that 1 to 3? Is that heavy, right? Or can we be up in the 12 to 15 repetition range?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, to your point, I mean, over the past decade or so, we've seen kind of that shift with a lot of that, certainly with the literature on hypertrophy and how to gain size. But it's funny because even those early rep range kind of schemes were actually so useful. And even though we almost pushed all the way against them, it's like, well, that's not true anymore. It's like, it still would work though, right? Like the data would still, it still works. And so the way I think through it still is just like, if I want my guys to get stronger, if the goal is strength on a movement on a day or in a month or a period, it's typically, can we do rep ranges between 1 to 5? And that's pretty broad, but I think, these ranges for strength can get even wider if you're untrained, right? Like if someone's untrained and they do 10 push-ups, it's probably going to make them better at their bench press. Even their 1RM might go up. And because I have a fairly untrained population, as long as it's within 1 to 5, and I might overlay a velocity component to that, it's like they probably still want to try to move fast, but the actual velocity is probably going to be relatively slower because it should be somewhat heavy. And maybe that's like zero point 0.6 or below, right? But if you're moving something really fast and you're only doing 5 reps of it, there's a good chance that that's not very heavy for you. And so that's how I kind of think that it's like 1 through 5 with kind of moderate to slow speeds. As long as you're trying to move it fast and gravity's doing its job, that's probably going to get you pretty strong. And then if we're looking at hypertrophy, it's basically 6 all the way to about 15, even though, the research might say you can go all the way to 30 if you want.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with that is I still train athletes, and so I still want some strength transfer. So as long as I'm kind of within that 15 or below range, I'm probably going to decrease fatigue. We're not going to have a ton of wasted reps, and there's probably some level of strength transfer. The other day we're doing an incline dumbbell bench, and they got 4 sets, and I tell them go 10, 8, 6, 6. The first set, use a way that you could probably do 15 to 20 times. Call that your warm up. Just get a little heavier, but that last set should look pretty challenging. Like you might want to ask me to spot you. And as long as you follow that, you're probably going to get bigger and stronger from that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at it, is like 1 to 5, moderate to slow speeds. Try to move it fast. If you can't move it fast, it's probably kind of heavy, and that's going to work wonders. And then 6 to basically 15 or so, that's going to be our hypertrophy stimulus. Proximity to failure comes to mind. Like your last rep on those things should be somewhat challenging. You can still leave 1 to 2 in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might say I'm sacrificing hypertrophy for that, but I'm also living to lift another day. Like what I'm giving up is more recovery.
Yeah.
But for our guys, we rarely do anything above 20, unless it's like I tell them to do 20 and they want to show off, and now they got, they're doing an ego battle on some arm farm or something. But
Yeah.
I basically live under the 20 rep range for the most part.
Yeah. And that strength transfer you're talking about, you mentioned sort of the size and strength, right? So we hear a lot about bodybuilders, building a lot of size, not necessarily strong. Is that what you're referring to there?
Yeah, I think at some point, if you're using, 30, I think the research might suggest as long as you're using 30% of 1 RM, you can gain size. But my goal is not just to gain size. My goal is always to gain strength. And if size comes with it, great. Or for some guys, I got a guy right now. It's like we put on 10 pounds since the spring started. If he doesn't put on another 10 pounds, it's going to be my butt, right? Like the coaches are going to be on me. So for
Mm-hmm.
those few cases, it's like you can just put on size, and if strength doesn't come with it, I'm okay with that. But for the most part, across the board, we want guys to get strong and a little bit bigger, versus
Yeah.
bodybuilders only care about getting bigger, and strength is just along for the ride.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we would apply that principle into longevity as well, right? Because what we're also looking for is as we're as we're pulling on a muscle, right? As we're forcing that muscle to shorten, it's pulling on a bone, right? So we need to build the strength, right? So that we can be resilient, so we can play our sport, but also for fall prevention, right? If you put your leg out in front of you and your quads aren't strong enough to stop you decelerating, you're on the ground, you're breaking your hip.
For sure, yeah.
Um, as we pull more on that bone, the bone is given that same stimulus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a bit of a view of a bone like it's a static tissue, or it's like a stick that's in the middle of your leg there, or, um, it's going to adapt to that stimulus in the same way.
Yeah.
So if we're not continually overloading it, if we're not giving it a really high degree of force in multiple angles, it's not forced to adapt. So I would view that as also not only strength but building bone density.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
I think that's an important thing. And just to really bring that point home, what we're talking about here is we're going up to 12 reps. And when you're saying like you're leaving sort of one or two in the tank, you're going to a point where if you had that weight and you stop at the top and you're like, maybe I could do two more, right? That's probably the point at which we're giving something up. We're okay. We're gonna put the weight down.
Yeah, for sure. Because I don't think there's actually much benefit to you. You hit that point of I'm not sure if I can do this one or two more times. It's a great stopping point because if you go for it, we know that it's going to be harder to recover from,
Yeah.
both in set and tomorrow or the next day, or in session or tomorrow or the next day. But the benefit that you get from that is probably not that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for for most people, my athletes and the athletes and clients you're working with, it's definitely probably not worth it because you could, if you really want more volume, just do another set, right? And it's almost like we almost, if one of my guys ever reaches true failure in a session, it was because I mismanaged or they mismanaged the set. It wasn't because that was planned. Um, because for the most part, we know that getting within two, that's good enough. Like that juice is worth the squeeze, but after that, there's not much more. And our guys will get into it sometimes because their egos get involved and then that's that art of it all, right? It's like, well, I know that you're probably not getting anything out of that, but you competing with that guy next to you long term probably has some benefit from it. So yeah, I have these rules I think in my mind, and then
Yeah.
occasionally I let guys break them because I think that the bigger picture is more important sometimes.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. And as we as we wrap here on the actual lifting, I really appreciate the detail that you've gone into there for us, Rams. One of the things that I've seen you talk about recently, and you've certainly written about it, is creatine supplementation. It's like we are not a biohacking supplement based company,
Right.
right? We do not recommend many supplements, but this is one that I think every human being on the planet should take. Can you break that down a little bit for us? You know, where do you see creatine in this strength and size building equation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I wouldn't call myself a big biohacker by any means, um, because most of the time that stuff just doesn't have enough research to support it, anyways. But when it comes to the supplements I do trust and believe in firmly, like creatine's at the top of the list. It might be the only one that's truly on top of the list because although protein's on top of the list, you can get enough of that through food if you're dialed in. Now, most of my athletes aren't, so we still want them to take protein as a supplement, but you can get that naturally. You're just
Yeah,
realistically not going to get 3 to 5 grams of creatine every day in your diet, let alone up to 20 grams. And some of the research now that I'm sure you've seen is like showing the benefit of even going more than 3 to 5. But it's cheap, it's easy to take, it's almost across the board beneficial for everybody, whether you're an athlete that wants to make the NBA or you're literally, my mom takes creatine.
right.
So, and everyone in between. And then you get into the benefits beyond. We know that it's going to help you get bigger, faster, stronger, but we also know it's going to help you think better. It might even fight Alzheimer's and cognitive issues. Like, for the most part, this thing should be in everyone's diet. And I'm surprised that, the research has been around forever. You know that more than me, right? You were reading about research or creatine before I even heard of creatine.
Yeah.
But it literally, it's so powerful now, and the research is so supportive of it. I don't know why every doctor isn't prescribing it. It literally like a multivitamin. Creatine should be part of that. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
we've
that's kind of my
it's
2 cents.
it's interesting because we've done really deep dives on the brain with physicians on this podcast. And outside of that, and what we've discovered is that largely dementia, Alzheimer's is an energy crisis in the brain. And what creatine is, right, your immediate energy source. When you need fast energy, that's where you go. And what is your brain if not fast energy, right?
Right.
It takes up 25% of your calories consumed, right? It's 2% of your body weight in your brain. that is a huge drain on energy. It's using the same amount of calories as your muscular system.
Hmm.
So if we can augment that energy system, and we would use it in high doses for concussions. Guys that get a concussion in hockey or in soccer, high dose creatine right away, so we don't get disruption in those energy pathways. I think that what we run into is certainly in women, but men as well. Oh, I'm going to bulk up. I'm going to retain water. I'm going to like suddenly it's like this transformation is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I tell people like I have been trying for at least 25 years to bulk up. This is as far as I've got,
For
and
sure. For
I got
sure.
10 times the testosterone you got. Like it
For
doesn't
sure.
happen like that.
Yeah. And I'm cracking up because my guys, there's a learning curve to it. And so whenever we introduce it, our guys will be like, "Ram, isn't that like steroids or something?" And I always look at them and say, "Dude, I've been taking it every day for 2 years, and this is what I got. This is it.
Yeah,
You think this is steroids? You look better than me right now, and you've never lifted."
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
totally. And you touched on literally, I think, three of the probably most important places that it's beginning to show up. There's a brand new study that I was just reading on creatine helps you recover from especially eccentric contractions, and it helps you recover more if you're a woman. So
Mm,
within women, they saw that was more beneficial. You talked about concussions. We know that it plays a role there. And then
mm,
obviously kind of dimension and the energy crisis in the brain. But I think fundamentally it's safe and it's effective and cheap too.
yeah,
That's the thing. Like if it was expensive and the research was uncertain, that would be one thing, right? You can give me all the benefits in the world you want, but if it costs $200 a day to take, it's just not feasible or practical. This stuff is cheap, effective, and I take it in gummy form. So every morning, it's like a little snack for me. Uh,
right.
so yeah, and that was like the one thing I got my mom to start taking it because she's taking the same gummies I take, and she enjoys them. And so now it's like on top of all of that being safe, cheap, and effective, it can actually be enjoyable like a snack too. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's no reason why people aren't doing this.
Yeah, I think if people are starting at that 3 to 5 gram range, and it should be cheap, right? If you go online and you look for a product and it's super expensive, it's got a bunch of stuff in it that doesn't do anything,
Yeah.
right? Don't look for a proprietary blend. Don't look for a caffeine laden product. Creatine monohydrate,
Yeah.
right? And it's gonna be 10 to 20 bucks. I don't know what tariffs have done to it these days, but
Yeah.
like it should be
Anything used to
relatively
be.
cheap. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you start getting into the 60 bucks, 70 bucks a bottle, you're looking
Yeah.
at the wrong thing.
Yeah. No
You know?
doubt. And
And it is,
the one I take is more expensive because it's in gummy format.
yeah,
But it's NSF, and maybe that's another like spot to kind of highlight is like if you're gonna take any supplement, just make sure it's tested and all those good things because
yeah,
to your point, I mean it's you can find a lot of things with proprietary blends and all of this stuff, and then when you actually test these products, half the time they don't even have anything in it or any of the things that they claim to have in it. So
right.
yeah, for sure.
And that the one you mentioned, NSF, so it's NSF certified for sport.
Hmm.
There's a couple of other third party testing agencies. So they test what's in it and you know, is it pure, right? Does it have stuff contamination that shouldn't be in it? So I think that is a really good point. Yeah, thanks for raising that. Rams, as we wrap up here now, we always ask for three things that people can take away. What are three things that people can do today if they're starting their journey, or maybe if they're new to weightlifting and they want to introduce this into their life today?
Yeah, three things. Okay, so if you're starting your journey, the first one, and I'm sure we can even talk all day on this stuff because I know that you guys do this. Just go for a walk, whether it's after you eat or generally speaking. I know you've covered this on the podcast too, but um, one because there's benefits to walking, but also because the barrier of entry is so low that almost everybody can do it. And I think oftentimes when people start these journeys, they place they place the barrier of entry so high. It's like I don't know. I
Yeah,
almost look at it like a club. Like if the journey is a club you're trying to get into, well, if the cover charge is $2,000, you're not going to go into that club. But
right.
if they say, "Hey, everybody's welcome, come on in for free," I might stop in there. And so to me, the walk is that. It's like it's the club that's free. Just start there. And so I encourage everyone to start with a walk. Obviously, um, second to that, don't race. Once you get into the weight room, just don't race into this thing because fundamentally you're not trying to work out for tomorrow or the next day. And maybe you have, some people have these kind of more immediate goals. I'm getting married in 3 months. Okay, in that case, you know, you probably got to ramp it up a little bit. But for the most part, you should be looking at this like a lifestyle. So what are you racing towards? Like if you going into the gym today for 10 minutes is enough, cool. That's all you needed. And you can build on it. And we actually have research that supports a ton of that. I was literally just this morning looking at a study that compared four minimal five programs that use minimal effective doses. And what it found was literally one set close to failure is enough for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Overcoming isometrics, 3 sets of 5 seconds is probably enough for a lot of things. So for most people, you don't need as much as you probably think you do.
Yeah.
In fact, it probably would take you longer to get to the gym than your whole workout probably necessarily needs to take. And then over time, build it. So yeah, I would say go for a walk, start slow. And I think the last one beyond just take creatine might be, I think trying, this is probably a little more complicated, but I think overall, and this is stuff you've covered on the podcast for sure, is just look at it more holistically and comprehensively. It's not just work, going for a walk is a great start. And then going for a walk, and if you go for a walk and you get a workout in the same day, that's a big win. But if you manage to go for a walk, get a workout in, and actually get 8 hours of sleep, like now you're really cooking.
Mhm.
And so as long as you like approach it holistically, I think it's no different than with our guys. I tell my guys in the weight room, my job is actually, I'm not making you better. Fundamentally, when you come into our weight room and practice, you're actually acutely getting worse. Like I'm creating trauma to your tissues and breaking it down. The core is making you fatigued and tired. You're probably getting dehydrated. So what we're doing acutely is actually, there's a consequence there, and there's probably a net negative. But if you recover and you fuel, and we do this long enough, the longitudinal or long-term gains are much, positive or beneficial. And so I think look at it holistically, because all these little things together come together to allow you to play the long game. And I think that's what you guys are doing, right? Is building this long game of helping people be, healthy, anti-fragile into their 80s and 90s and extend their life. And that only happens if you look at it holistically. So yeah, those would probably be the three.
Nice, man. Like, I resonate with all of those because, I even know for myself, right? We just moved across the country, and so we didn't train for 2, 3 weeks. We come back, and day one, we try and go right back to where we were. That was the last time we went to the gym that week.
No doubt.
So we were just like limping around, right? So
No.
we do that. We get into a mindset sometimes where, oh man, I don't have time to do my whole workout. I'm just not going to the gym. Like it's not how it works. Just consistency is key,
Hmm.
right? Go in and do your one set. Go for your walk. I think that's so valuable for people to hear. Um, just like that strength coach that came to watch you drove 9 hours to come in and watch you do goblet squats,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Understand that that's the important stuff, right? Just doing those fundamental elements.
For
I keep
sure.
I keep wanting to call them the basics, but I'm changing that. It's not basic,
Hmm.
right? That diminishes it, makes
Yeah.
it sound like it's not valuable. No, that's the stuff.
Yeah.
That's what's going to
Yeah.
create the change.
What a great point. Like, I think especially nowadays too, again with social media and the amount we've just moved over the past, call it 20 years for sure with the internet, or 25 years with the internet, but more so I think over the past decade with social media, is the whole world has moved from a place of like not enough information, where access to information was really challenging, to now over information and over consumption of information. And it's so easy to get confused and lost. And to your point, like the basics probably diminishes it, because the hard part now is being able to do that stuff. Can you do the fundamentals without being distracted by all these other things out there? You don't need that much. Just go for a walk, work out twice a week, and try to sleep 8 hours. And if you do that consistently for a long time, you'll probably be in a really good spot.
Yeah, you're going to be in great shape, and like even down to the lower lifting volumes, lower lifting weights. When we were in our 3 year run with no injuries, Maddie's program that he put together, like it was minimal effective doses, right? This was keeping tissues awake, right? And that's what we did. The guys got. I mean, we might have been in the weight room 15 minutes a day,
Hmm.
maybe, right? It was an isometric groin. It was like a whole body movement, some sort of plyometric, and they were out,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And super effective.
Yep. Yeah. and I know we could talk training all day, but like that approach is, some might call it micro dosing, but it's literally it almost, because of what you said earlier, your training approach aligns so much with your philosophy, which was you guys were supplementing hockey. And it was like, if we're going to supplement hockey, why would our weight room sessions take 2 hours, and why would we kill them essentially and create, why would we do all the things that we know we don't want to do if we're supplementing hockey? And so I look at the same way with, in our weight room. It's just, if a guy tells me something doesn't feel right, like, we'll come back to it tomorrow. We could live to fight another day. It's okay.
Yep. It's all about consistency. Let's not die on this hill.
Right. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Rams, where can people find you, mate?
Yeah, the main place is just Instagram, which is dr.ramsey.nijem. I'm not really on Twitter or LinkedIn. I mean, I guess I'm kind of on those, but I don't ever respond to those things. So yeah, mainly just Instagram is where I hang out for the most part. And other than that, I'm coaching athletes and playing with my dog.
I love that. And you started a podcast recently, right?
I did, yeah. It's like a solo podcast on YouTube, which currently has no direction, and but we do have consistency, which is most important. We'll figure out the rest later. So
exactly.
Yeah, I started that at the Performance Insider podcast.
Nice, man. Well, everyone should definitely go and follow Ramsey there, because I haven't come across somebody who can break down the volume of research you could break down is like mind blowing to me. I was telling Michelle this the other day, just constantly like breaking it down, making sense of it, but taking very complex and making it very simple. So I really appreciate that about you, Ramsey, and it's something I admire a lot.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. My girlfriend doesn't love it because I live on my computer, and it's funny because someone like you says that, and it's like, yo, that means a ton, because you understand how nuanced that stuff is.
Yeah.
And half the time I'm deleting, like, anytime I post a graphic, it's like, yo, it's, here's 5 or 6 slides. It probably was 12 slides. I deleted half because even though that's important for the conversation, it's too complicated for social media.
Yeah.
But honestly, I gotta credit you for a lot of that. Like, you probably don't even remember this story, but I remember when you first brought me in, you had all these blue journals in your office, and I asked you what those were, and you were like, that's science. And I asked you if I could borrow one. I took one home that night, and I remember reading a study. It was the first time I ever even realized exercise science was actually research.
Yeah.
And I think just starting my career under someone that appreciated science, had a PhD, like, here we are 15 years later, and it's like how much of that has totally shaped what I do now. So it's, a huge thank you to you. And for you to say that really means a lot.
Rams, that means the world to me. That's the proudest part of my career, is watching guys like you and Matt go through your careers and move on to great things. All right, brother. Well, thanks for coming on today, mate.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That was a powerful conversation with Dr. Ramsey Nijem on strength training and optimizing your vitality. Here are 3 key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, start simple. Begin with something as simple as taking a walk. This lowers the barrier to entry on your exercise program and helps you build the program slowly over time. Number 2, think long-term. Prioritize consistency and gradual progress rather than quick gains. Number 3, embrace holistic approaches. Recognize that strength training is positively impacted by factors such as nutrition and getting appropriate sleep. If today's discussion inspired you and you're looking for ways to integrate these principles into your own life, Vitality Collective is here to guide you. Our personalized approach to health and performance will ensure you're strong, resilient, and vibrant at any stage of life. Visit www.vitality-collective.com to take your next step. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.